Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It's Thursday, August 29th, 2024, and today we're going to try the one color that's been sitting on my desk now for a couple of weeks, and it is indigo blue. Now, we've used indigo blue a little bit in the soap series. We used it in the paper series, the paper making series, a whole lot more, and we got a medium dusty blue, which was very pretty, but not as dark as we wanted. So let's try both Resincrete and Magic Pour again. Let's use it as a dry ingredient in the powder and run tests on both of those. And let's also use it as a wet ingredient, meaning putting the indigo blue powder into the water and see what the difference is. Let's run some clips. Not only are we running two experiments, one with wet colorant and one with dry, we're also running an experiment in terms of visuals. You'll notice that I did not sift in the indigo powder by what was formerly Nurture Soap. Now it's Nature Handmade. And so I get hung up with Resincrete. We also notice that Magic Pour is struggling again, and it's struggling. Oh, I haven't even added the water yet for Resincrete. 2 teaspoons, which works out to be 24 grams. Magic Pour is struggling in that we always have it seize up on us, almost always, and I bite the bullet and add 10 extra grams of water, which is above the recommended 5-gram tolerance. However, our colorant, our indigo powder, did not register on the scale for measuring the weight of 2 teaspoons. So weight-wise, it didn't matter one way or another because we couldn't calculate it. Both Resincrete and Magic Pour are giving me a hard time, but Resincrete, I did not have to add any extra water. I just had to work at it more than I normally am used to working at Resincrete. Usually you mix your color and your powder, pour in your water, and it is like milk. It mixes up, it incorporates, and it pours. But both of them are giving me a hard time today. And sneak peek, you can see on the upper left of the Magic Pour clip, the Resincrete incorporated and was poured. Now, as of this recording, neither one of them is dry yet, and we're about at 40 minutes on both of them. I expect Magic Pour to take a long time because I added extra water, but it is what it is. We're trying to be fair and do as comprehensive and thorough and fair testing as possible to decide, at least for my purposes, which one of these compounds, these casting compounds, I'm going to use. And the pouring rate for both of them was very similar. Resincrete was a little more liquid once I fought through getting the liquid all incorporated in the dye and the product. Magic Pour was pancake batter, as we have seen, although I had to add that extra 10 grams. And I'll take it on the chin, but it's going to take longer to cure. I did have overflow because of that extra water, and so I poured the same 2 picture frames that I poured last week with Magic Pour, and Resincrete was spot on because there was no extra water. And for both of these molds, I take my ballpoint stylus and I go around the edges and loosen up any bubbles which I didn't see any, and I shake the table, tap the molds, all that jazz. And for the magic pour, it did not bubble up like pancake batter on a hot griddle like it did for us last week in our tempera paint test. So I don't know what to say about that. Hopefully I got all my bubbles out on both of these, and we'll see at unmolding. In the meantime, before we start our second test where we put the indigo powder into our 28 or 24 grams of water and add it to the powder, I just want to mention Nurture Soap, formerly Nurture Soap, where I got the indigo dye, and the new name of the company. Apparently there was a problem with somebody misusing their name. I'm not going to go into their story. It's on their website. The website is now called Nurture Handmade, and I have never had a problem with orders, delivery time. Anything that I've ordered from them has been great. So I just want to make sure that I mention that before we move on. I bet you're wondering this whole time why the alpaca is screaming at us hygrophobia. We're about to find out. We've got our 80 grams of Resincrete pre-measured. We've got our water, 24 grams pre-measured. We dump in our 2 teaspoons of indigo blue, and holy moly, it's not wetting. So that means that indigo blue is hygrophobic, or indigo blue is insoluble in water. Without going into all the ins and outs of soap making, just know this. Some products in soap making are insoluble in water, and this is one of them. Surprise! Mixing pot, and I had to do something. So the only thing I had to hand that would not alter the chemical properties too much was alcohol. And I sprayed alcohol in the cup and got, blue dye everywhere. But it was enough to get the process started. And I eventually got the mixture all wet. But on a microscopic level, I wonder if any of that dye powder actually got wet, or if it just got dispersed in the wet powder. So I poured out my coaster, I poured out some extras, because mysteriously I had way too much this time, still the same 80 grams powder, 24 grams water. I can't tell you at all. So I know that the Resincrete is gonna probably give me an issue. And it's not their fault. I've seen it happen over and over again. You mix the correct ratios in Resincrete, it pours out like skim milk, like I've said before, and voila, you have a dry product in a half an hour and a cured product in about 24 to 48 hours. And I can tell you a couple hours later, having edited most of this show all during the time between pouring and actually evaluating, none of the things that we have poured today are set. The Resincrete dry dye to dry powder is setting, but like I said, it's a couple hours later. And the other Resincrete, the wet to dry that I just ran, is liquid. Well, there might be something we haven't factored in. The experiment is a bust for a couple of reasons, one of which is that the Nurture Soap Indigo powder is not soluble in water. So that meant that all the water got absorbed and processed, if you will, by the product itself, and nothing cured. That flour mold, I actually took it and another smaller overflow piece, put it in my toaster oven at 120 degrees for a total of an hour, and only the smaller overpour piece actually dried, but it broke and crumbled as you saw the flour did. So then I got to thinking about humidity. Are either of these products affected by humidity? Let's find out. 70 grams of Resincrete, 21 grams of water, and I think 14 drops of the darkest blue I could find. My cheap, inexpensive set of alcohol inks. Mix it up, dig a hole, just like I did before. Make sure I get all the sides and the bottom scraped, incorporate all that powder, and it was a little thick, surprisingly. But I decided I would test that tolerance, and I put in about a gram, maybe a gram and a half of water. It didn't even register on my digital scale. That loosened it up, and I was able to pour it. And it's the consistency that I expect. It's like skim milk. Um, and I had just a tiny bit of overpour, so I tossed that stuff into all of the overpour in that little extras mold. I poked all the bubbles, jiggled the table, all the things. The second time around for Magic Pour, I got smart and got out a stopwatch timer on my phone and hit start as soon as I had fiddled around with the water and got it right. Put in my alcohol inks, and again, same amount of drops, whatever I said it was, 14, I think, to get a dark blue. And let the timer go as soon as it was dropped. Dug a hole in my um, my powder so the water would go down, or the liquid now would go down, and started mixing. Same as the Resincrete. No, sorry, let me correct that. In the round mold, the first test was Magic Pour. This test is Resincrete. Did all the things and poured it in, had enough, didn't have to do any overpour for this one because it was exact. Poked all the bubbles and jiggled the table, all that jazz. What I can tell you is the Magic Pour clip, the first Magic Pour clip that I just showed you, was at 3.5 times speed. And you could already see there's water pooling up in the round coaster. And the Resincrete in the square coaster is setting. There's no water pooling up, it's being absorbed. And I'd leave the timer running, and this is at, I think, 3.25 speed. And I go and I clean my cups, which are now, starting to get stained, or put some alcohol in them after I wash them out and wipe them dry. The timer is still going. What I can tell you is that these two perform differently. There's no other way to explain it. They're formulated differently, they take colors differently, and they mix differently, and they cure differently. In the tempera paint experiment, we saw that it mixed up beautifully. You can put it in the uh, dry mix like baking and then add your water, or you can add it to the water, mix it up like a paint, and then add it to the powder. I prefer, in the color tests we did, I prefer the outcome of mixing the tempera paint in the powder because the color comes out even. And if I want a marble, I can, do other things to make a marbled effect. But just for these tests, we want even color. So the Magic Pour experiment was already working when I started the Resincrete experiment in this section. And you saw the water pooling up. It had about a I want to say a 6 minute, maybe 5 minute head start. And now we need to see what the results are an hour later. So, magic pour in the round, darker blue, and Resincrete in the square, lighter blue. And they both cured within an hour. I can tell you that Resincrete cured within 15 minutes. And the thing I noticed this time around is that my mold is now dull. Was it a very expensive mold? No. But I have to ask myself, do I have to now keep this set of round and square just for EcoPore type products? Which EcoPore is a brand name, and I'm going to call these acrylic resins from now on, or casting compound. You can see that even though we mixed our alcohol ink, we still got a color splotch. Let's put the magic pour on top of this Resincrete square, and you can clearly see the difference. Everything was the same, and there's a color difference. Compare that to the color difference of the saturation of the indigo blue that is water insoluble, and there is a stark difference. Now you might wonder, why am I doing all this? Why am I not just buying the manufacturer's product for dyeing and tinting? The first answer to that is I want rich colors. I want super saturated pigment so that if I want to make a navy blue, the end result is navy blue. And if I want to make pastel blue, then I can add some titanium white or, some white acrylic paint, some other whitener. But since these are already white powders, Resincrete a little whiter, as you can see in the comparison in the square coaster, nevertheless, they're white powders. So to get a dark, rich navy blue is going to take a lot of colorant, no matter what you do to it. And we do have some options. We can use cement colorants. I have not done those experiments because, frankly, I've spent all the money I'm going to spend on this hobby in terms of trying to figure out what is the most cost efficient. From a product to product comparison without dyes, molds, wear and tear, all that jazz, plus colorants, Resincrete performs more consistently, but it doesn't take color as well. And what I mean when I say I want dark, rich, saturated colors, these colors that you see in this example, not sponsored, didn't send me any, don't have any, they are super saturated and will do better against the very white pigment of these products and give me darker, richer colors, but they will not ever look like the colors that you see in the jar. It's just not going to happen. The second thing might seem a little persnickety to those who are veterans in both resin artwork and in this newer acrylic or casting compound hobby. And that is when I go to buy oil paints, some higher end acrylic paints, some watercolors, and some concrete pigments, I get color names that I recognize. I know what to expect generally, and I can choose between, for example, burnt umber and burnt sienna and know exactly which one is going to be on the red side and which one is going to be on the green side of color mixing. And to me, that's really important because I don't generally, in my paper crafting, I don't work in pastels. And I don't want to just be limited to pastel colors. Now you can say to me, well, mica powders and chameleon powders. I also don't do a lot of flashy glittery type things. I think glitter or shimmer mists are great as an accent, but I personally don't want my whole piece to be, shiny, sparkly, glittery kind of stuff. I like um, a different, oh, how do there's no diplomatic way to say this. I like a different visual aesthetic. When you look at something I make, I want your eyes to be resting, not like going all over the place trying to interpret glitter and sparkle and mica and, chameleon all in the same piece. I want your eyes to look at the piece and go, oh, I like that because it's clever, it's pretty, it's handsome, or it's beautiful in some rare cases. It just seems to me that there should be no earthly reason why a water soluble natural colorant wouldn't work in these products, and that I should be able to have that choice instead of the only way to get navy blue is, to super saturate something with a whole bottle of alcohol ink, or use a mica powder, like maybe 5 grams to get a navy blue and maybe never actually achieve that. That to me seems wasteful. And I think the manufacturing companies of pigments and paints and products that are supposed to be compatible with uh, these acrylic compounds or casting compounds really ought to take notice and develop products for those of us who have a different preference. In the end, all these somewhat embarrassing failures are due to the fact that while I understand color theory and I understand a little bit about water chemistry, having been a freshwater aquarist for off and on my whole life, I don't understand the properties interacting in these products. I don't understand why something that you can paint with acrylic paints, why it's a problem to try and dye with acrylic paints in the case of Magic Pour. Why does it always seize up? And I'm not the only person saying that. Nevertheless, I've spent all the money I'm going to spend on experiments at this time. I want to do some projects. And so on Sunday, I will just do a project. I hope you guys weren't too off-put by me being disappointed and a little grumpy. I appreciate you sticking around through both of these episodes. God bless you. I'll see you Sunday.